Welcome back, everyone. In this episode, I'm heading down to Mildura Riverfront to meet Kristen for another podcast. We're going to have a chat to a bloke that's been involved in local politics, which seems like he's been involved in it forever. He's also been instrumental in the formation of a great local support organisation. He volunteers whenever he can. He's a motorsport fanatic. He's great at his photography and he's always out taking photos. So let's go down and have a chat to Mildura Councilor Glenn Milne.
Out and About Sunraysia, where the river runs and the gum trees sway. Vines so green and sky so wide, come take a trip, enjoy the ride.
So welcome Glenn and welcome Kristen. How are we both?
Oh, how could you be on a day like this? It's just beautiful, and we're down beside the river, so there.
Beautiful.
Couldn't be anything but happy.
And just across on the Loch Island, with Field of Lights is getting all sorted. And how far away are we from that happening?
Yeah, well, that's supposed to be in April, so it's coming up. There should be some volunteers. I'm just looking. I can't see anybody over there at the moment, but I know there's been quite a strong little team over there putting lights together. So they've been having a bit of fun. Yep. There's thousands of them that they've got to build. So yeah, they're working pretty hard to get it all happening.
Now, Glenn, we're just going to jump straight into it.
Yep.
When did you get involved in politics, and what was the inspiration behind it?
Oh, look, you could probably go back. I had 6 sisters, so I've probably been involved in politics for a long time.
It's a long time.
Since I was born. But if we look at local politics, I worked at Sunraysia Daily. Was my first real job, I guess, and as a press photographer, and you got to sit and read the paper and listen to what was going on, attend council meetings, and you would talk to the public and you'd hear what was going right, what was going wrong. And so I guess I always had a little bit of an opinion.
Just a little bit?
Just a little bit, yeah, I probably got that from my mother. And anyway, I'd follow local politics, and I think it got to the point, it was around when we were looking at the toxic waste dump.
Yep.
And I'd been asked to go down and photograph it for, I think, the Age, because originally they were going to put it at Oyen, yep, or on the outskirts of Oyen, and all the farmers went down there, lined up at the front gate of the property that they were looking at, and said, okay, you want to put it here? Come on in. And nobody from the government would come through that gate, because the farmers were all just lined up there and they were going to deal with them if they stepped on the property. And anyway, I'd said to a few councillors, told them what I thought should happen, and one of them said, oh, all right, you smart Alec, you think you're so good, why don't you have a go? And I thought, oh yeah, all right, I will. So we were going out, the family, we were going to Lake Coleraine for the weekend, and so it must have been a Friday, and it was the last day you could put your name in to stand for council. So
What year was this, Glenn?
oh, this would be back 20 years ago, so what's that, 2004, 5, somewhere around there. And 2005, I think.
Okay.
But anyway, I decided, well, I'll have a go, and then I realised I didn't have any cash on me. My wife had the card, she was at Lake Coleraine, so I had to go and scrounge some money off my mum. And anyway, I went and paid the money and signed up, did all the stuff, and then I told my wife what I'd done when I got out to Lake Coleraine. But I spent $50 on advertising.
Yep.
So, I put in a big contribution there. And funnily enough, I
Ads
got
were
voted
cheap.
in.
Ads were cheap back
I
then.
got voted in. I was surprised, and quite a few of the councillors were surprised too. But so that's where it all started. But I've always had an interest in our community. Like, it's a great community to live in, to grow up in. It's always been a good place. And living in Mildura, you walk down the street, you see friends, you see family.
Yep.
People are friendly, they stop and have a chat.
even people you don't necessarily know, but you'll give the nod of the head to because you know they're...
Yeah, they'll wave
yeah,
to you,
yeah.
and
Familiar.
you know, I worked for the newspaper, and I saw so many aspects of our life, and you know, it's a great place to live.
Yep.
And so I wanted to put in my 2 bobs worth, but really in a positive way, because I wanted my kids to grow up here. I wanted them to have a future, and I was looking further down the track, grandkids, which I've now got, and have them live here and have a future too. You know, the family's been in the district since, you know, early 1900s, and I want them to still be here, you know, century after century after century.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes.
Now, you were talking about the Mallee toxic waste dump there that we eventually got rid of, or didn't even get it to start with. We got before it happened. Would that be one of your biggest achievements? You think, getting that off the table?
Oh look, I didn't have a lot to do with that. I was a bit frustrated by that because I thought I would have liked to have seen our councilors in our community do the same thing at Hatter that the guys at Oyen did. You know, I would have put steel railway line, I would have concreted it up and, you know, made it almost impossible for the government to even look at the land. But certainly that, well, the government walked away from it right on about the election, or just after the election, just after I got elected. And, you know, that was pretty good news for everybody. And I couldn't see any way it could possibly go ahead. You know, I'd photographed most of it and seen the damage that it would have done. Particularly my family are farmers, and they were going to put it on land where it could leach back into the soil and underground water and everything.
Next to the
so
National Park
yeah,
as well,
stupid place to put it. Yep.
You go, Chris.
What do you think one of your biggest challenges might have been throughout your career so far?
I think one of the biggest challenges was getting the railway line upgraded, the Murray Basin Rail Project. And you know, I got onto council, and the concern, even back to toxic waste dump, the reason that Russell Savage supported that was because he thought he'd get his railway line back, and that didn't happen, but it was still a huge need, and it had frustrated everybody. And when I got the first role as mayor, which was probably my second term, first year of my second term, so I've been there, you know, 4 years, that was the 5th year. And I sat down with the CEO and I said, look, you know, what if we get all the mayors together along the railway line and go down, talk to the government and tell the government this is what we need. We need it fixed. I said it's a win-win for everybody. You know, there's all sorts of different politics right along that railway line, but everybody wanted it fixed from Mildura right through to Melbourne. Mildura to Melbourne. And I said all we really need is a 24-hour turnaround, and just go down there. We'd had John Thwaites up, and he'd said, you know, if you're going to ask the government for anything, make sure you're very clear. Don't confuse it with a double ask.
Yeah.
You know, don't say, oh, you know, we want the railway line fixed and we want a passenger train. Like, you know, because the government will go, oh, well, you know, when you make up your mind what you really want, then come and talk to us.
Yeah.
You know, so what we did is we just went down there, we rang up all the mayors along the railway line. They asked me to head the delegation. Crispy took us down. It was the Conservative government, LNP, and we met with them, and I wasn't that hopeful, but I thought, like, this is our one shot. And so all we asked for was a 24-hour turnaround from Mildura to Melbourne for a train, just fix the railway line, so it'll do that. That's all I had to meet. And anyway, it went fairly well, so we thought, oh, well, we gave it a shot.
Yep.
And lo and behold, we got the phone call back. The government had put the money aside, it was fully funded, and said they'll upgrade the railway line and they'll standardise it, which we didn't even ask for, but they saw the need for the freight. Unfortunately, the state government lost the election, but they had the money sitting there. They'd put the money away. The Labor government came in, they said they'd have to reassess it, but they came and talked to us and basically got the same request, and they were smart enough to see that it was a good idea.
Good idea, yeah.
And we got it through. But that was a huge challenge because it had been there for years and years and years. Everyone had talked about it. That was a $400 million grant, and yeah, we got it. And it still isn't perfect, unfortunately, because basically the upgrade got messed up. But hopefully one day we'll get that completed, because rail freight's still vital for our community.
Yeah. Now, aside from politics, John, we're going to get confused with John Arnold, your old
It's all right. I answer to anything, mate.
Glenn, apart from politics, MASP, a really, really great support organisation here in Mildura. You're pivotal in its setup. Can you tell us how that all happened?
Yeah, look, it started out as Sunraysia Youth Accommodation Project, which was a community board. I was employed as their first youth worker, and as part of that role we worked with Emmaus House, which was another community board, but they work close together because we deal with homeless people. And I ended up as the secretary of Emmaus House as my role, and the worker from Emmaus House was on my community board because we worked together all the time. And then I think about 7 years into that, it had grown. When I started, we had one youth house, 4-bedroom house, and we were looking after 4 kids. But it quite quickly grew once, had a paid worker in the position. We got more houses through the state government, so they were owned by the state. Then we also realised there was a need for kids to be able to go out onto properties and work, to get a work ethic, which would help them and give them accommodation. So by that stage, we got another position, which I think was originally Rob Doro, then Doug Tong. But we worked together to buy caravans or get caravans donated. I think we ended up with about 15 or 18 caravans that we could run out. Like if a family said they would take somebody into their house, then we could put the caravan in the backyard and they could give a kid accommodation as well as support, or we could take it out to a fruit block where they could get some work. So we always had a plan to expand. Then we looked at the Rural Students Hostel program. Built on that, we put in a submission and got a house. And then we thought, there's a motel up for sale. Let's put in for that. And the deal was that it was a rural students hostel. But then we thought, okay, well, the kids are rural. If they're students, if they want to stay, some accommodation, they'll need to go to school. So we bought the old Vine Leaf Motel, which is where MASP is now.
Right.
And the kids had to go to school to stay there. That was you got it. The money as a grant to buy it was $300,000. If we sold it inside 20 years, you had to pay back pro rata the percentage of the grant, but we didn't need to do that because they kept it for 20 years, knocked it down and built MASP where it is. And I worked with Sunraysia Youth Accommodation for 9 years. It then morphed into MASP, which was combining Emmaus House, Sunraysia Youth Accommodation Project and COCAP, which was Christian Outreach Centre. They'd put together a service to deal with families. So Emmaus House was mainly older men, and we were youth at the Youth Accommodation Project, and COCAP were the families. So that all was combined. I left then, and Doug took over as the coordinator of the whole lot.
Yeah.
And I then joined the committee.
Yep.
And I think I was on that for about 30 years. But our plan was always to grow.
To grow, yeah.
And
Provide more services.
yeah, when in the I think in those early years we had the Liberal government, the Kennett government, and they changed like the payments to fee for service. And I remember Doug rang me up in a panic at the end of one financial year and said, "Mate, we've really got a problem." And I said, "What?" He said, "You better come round and see me." And I did. And he said, "Look, we've made a profit of $500,000. And I said, "What? We're supposed to have about 20,000." Yeah. And anyway, so we bought the building in Langtree Avenue, which was an old dental clinic. So we paid cash for that.
Can I just say something on the side of that?
Yeah.
I work at Tech Ace. We had a phone system in there in that Langtree Avenue building. Man, the cabling in that place. The blokes at work, whenever I said, "You got to go down and put a new handset in there," they just about slapped me about.
Well, Tech Ace used to help us when we were in Bowring's buildings at one stage too, because we moved around a fair bit. And so we bought that building, and then the next year we had the same problem, so we bought the building next door. And that gave us quite a bit of equity. Like, we bought it at the right time, and eventually when we got a government grant to build the big building, then we were able to sell those other buildings, and we had enough to build the very nice building that they're in now. But while that's taken about 5 minutes to say, it took us around 30 years to achieve.
Get
but
to that point,
but Doug and I sat down and mapped out where we really wanted to go when we were back with a few houses and a few caravans. And that was the plan, and we got to it. I was made a life member at one stage of MASP, and look, I left the board, I think it was about 3 years ago, when we got to finalise that building.
Was that like my work's done?
Yeah. It was an end point. And look, it's good to have fresh blood, new people in there, new enthusiasm, and you've got to be able to let go at some stage. But I sit back and go, like, I achieved, and we achieved what we wanted to, was to provide something for young people, homeless young people, and families, with support staff and a whole lot of different, we wanted support workers to work with them, to help them get them back to their families if possible. And all these ideas we had in place back in the 1980s, well, they're there now. And it's a great service. It'll never go away.
No, and it's well established now.
It makes me really happy.
No, that's great. Motorsport.
So we all have something in common here today. So Paul used to be an absolute proficient modified sedan racer back in his day.
I was quite possibly the worst person to ever get around that track. I don't think it ever went back on the trail of about the help.
The old number 56. And obviously that come from his gorgeous wife. We won't go there because she's given him all that skill. So obviously I have a passion for motorsport. I know, Glenn, we've done some bits and pieces in the past. I met down with you at the Motorsport show, the Sun Assist show.
Yep.
Where does your passion for motorsport come from?
Oh, look, it goes right back. I mean, I grew up on a fruit block. So my dad, he got given a engine out of an auto bike. So that was a push bike that had an engine in the front wheel. Right, and it belonged to our insurance agent. And the guy had pulled it apart, couldn't put it back together again. So Dad said, "No, give it to me, I'll have a go." So Dad put it back together again, of course. And he made, look, Dad can make all sorts of things. So he made this little metal tractor type thing. The back wheel gearing mechanism was actually a push lawnmower. Dad took the blades out. That was also a good idea with little kids. You know,
I'm a bit worried about the insurance brokers, so we might go back to that later.
And it had two wheelbarrow wheels that Dad welded in onto the steel wheels of the mower. And anyway, we had this little engine in it, and it would do a couple of kilometres an hour. And
how fast did it go after you got to it?
Yeah, no, Dad. Like I would have only been 4 or 5, and Dad made up a little trailer, and we could putt around the fruit block with that. You know, I'd drive around with the sisters in the back, and our friends come and drive around. Then we progressed from that. It got a bit slow as I got a bit older, and I was driving the tractor, you know, when I was 3 or 4. Dad had set up a hand clutch so I could drive the grey Fergie and, you know, rope me onto the seat so I wouldn't fall under the wheels type of thing. All really good OH&S stuff that you'd get away with today.
I've heard stories like this from my wife who grew up on a fruit block. And
I think parents today, if they did that, you know, the kids would all be in a home somewhere. But anyway, we progressed to, my cousins had a go-kart with that was quite a bit bigger that their father had made, so I inherited that, and Dad put a Pope lawnmower motor in that, and that was quite good because you could slide that around corners and it went pretty hard. And my dad would, you know, show us how to tip it up on 2 wheels and things like that, really safe stuff. So that went on from there, but the little engine out of the other little tractor actually was then put into a motorbike frame. I've actually still got the second version of that that's hanging on my shed wall with the engine still in it. It's got little wheels like this, you know, 8 inches, 10 inches across, and it did 15 kilometres an hour, and we've still got it. It's a mini bike. But my grandmother was a Perkins.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay. And so, you know, Dad's cousin was Eddie Perkins, who was Larry Perkins' father rather. And so Dad was always very proud of Eddie, his cousin. You know, he raced London to Sydney, he raced open wheel cars, did rallies, all sorts of things. And so the Perkins family shared a passion for Lancia cars, which my dad had. You know, they sold them to the Perkinses and they bought them back again, all sorts of things. And Larry's dad serviced Rover cars and Land Rovers, etc. And my auntie had a Rover 90, beautiful car. My uncle had a 105S, and you know, they'd take them down for Eddie to service. And so there was that relationship, and then of course Larry, Gary, Terry, Peter, all the boys started racing cars and Formula Vs. So as a kid, 13 or 14, you know, I'd get racing car news to see what Larry had done, and he went on to Formula One. I mean, and really hard in those days. They didn't have money. He did it hard, and you know, was a brilliant driver and probably could have done far better if he had the money that some of these other guys had overseas. But
a decent sort of an engineer as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely brilliant. And you know, there's some pretty wild stories about what they did. And you know, I can remember going down to the farm there and seeing a Fiat 850 Sports that I think it may have been Larry or one of the boys brought home, and anyway, it didn't slide in the gate as well as the car that they'd gone out with, and it sort of did a bit of a tumble and was just parked in the yard there. And anyway, so that background of interest in particularly motorsport was through that family tie. And but of course then we had the Crumps. I grew up at Cardross, and our block backed Crumps block. So I'd sit there and watch Phil and Eddie. Well, I started watching them at primary school because they went to Cardross too. And you know, Eddie could ride his dragster bike on the back wheel, like from the Cardross school right up to Pawson Avenue.
Wow.
You know, without having to drop it. And so we had the Crump family, and the Crumps, the boys would always have, there'd be the Williamses, the Collets, the whole crew.
Yeah.
Would ride their motorbikes around this Sunday afternoon. They come flying through our place. So Phil at one stage was, did some pruning for Dad, and of course Speedway started. Well, Phil started on scrambles, and I can remember him sitting at the kitchen table, and they'd gone up to Broken Hill for the weekend, and Dad said, "Oh, so how'd you go, Phil? With your scrambles?" Because he had a motorbike from Baylis's, brand new off the showroom floor, and ridden it around for a couple of days, then rode scrambles, and was probably back on the showroom floor on Monday morning as a brand new one. And that may or may not have happened. But Dad said to him, "Oh, how'd you go, Phil?" He goes, "Oh, not too bad. Won 9 out of 10 races. Bear won the other one, which was Eddie's brother."
Yeah.
So, we followed scrambles, and then Speedway every Sunday night. We'd be in there and lined up on the fence watching Phil race Speedway. My cousin Keith also rode, and was pretty good. So we did a few trips with him. And it grew from there, and motorbikes were fantastic. As kids, we loved motorbikes. We slid the tractors around the block, We punished the ute fairly hard, and I think I had my first car at about 12, and that got hammered around the block too. So,
and that leads me into my next question. Your photography, you take a lot of motorsports photography, but you also take a lot out in the bush and on farms and bits and pieces like that. Are you self-taught? And what's your favourite location?
Yeah, well, look, I think, what was it, year 11, Form 5, an art teacher didn't turn up at, the start of the year. So one of my cousins, I was closest with in Ballarat, he'd been doing photography, and I thought, that sounds like a bit of fun, so I thought, I'll have a go at that.
Yeah.
And so I did photography instead of art. We had Mick Gordon, who was an American right into basketball, but he'd also worked for a number of different magazines in the US. And so he taught me how to develop film.
Okay.
So I did photography for art because I'd done art, signed up for art. And anyway, the art teacher turned up after about 3 months, and I said, "Mick, I don't want to do art. I want to keep doing this," because I was having a ball. I could go around the school, photograph all sorts of stuff, then develop the film, and it was the dark room was at the back of the science room.
Yes.
So Robert Wolfe was the science teacher, and you could set the alarm bell all the time and annoy the hell out of Wolfie. And he'd come and tell me to be quiet, and I go, "But Mr. Wolfe, we've got to set the alarm, to make sure we don't overdevelop the film, and it's in the dark, And he just shook his head. But so that's where I learnt to develop film. Yeah. And then at the end of the year, Mick said to me, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm getting out of here. I've had enough of school. You really don't want me back again next year." And
I had a similar sort of conversation with my teacher.
well, I think Enid Borshman actually was the principal, and
bless her.
She called me over, at the end, and she said, "Glenn, you really should be doing year 12. You got some of the best marks in the class. You've got the best options because of I'd done art and I'd done physics, maths. I did biology instead of chemistry because I didn't want homework."
Your story was different, Paul.
Yeah,
I'm really thinking your story was different.
The first bit was similar. The second bit,
I never found that the work. It wasn't hard. I was good at maths, but I just didn't want to go to school. I wanted to do other things, and. Anyway, she said, "You really should come back," and I just said, "No, if you thought I was a problem this year, you really don't want me back next year." Anyway, Mike he was friends with Don Turvey at Sunraysia Daily, and I think probably through basketball had met him, etc. And he said, look, they're looking for a a cadet. You need to go in there. And I go, right, because I thought I'd probably go and work in a bank or work for my dad, because we had citrus at Nangelock and dried fruit at Cardross, and I'd just go and do something. I'd go and teach guitar or something, Anyway, the next thing, Don Turvey turned up at the high school and said, Mike Gordon's been telling me about you.
Didn't get away with that one.
I was sort of being lazy, but Don turned up and gave me a couple of rolls of film to shoot.
Yeah.
I did that, and anyway, he said, come in and see me. So I went in and saw him, and he said, oh, righto, well, turn up on the 1st of January and you got yourself a job.
Beautiful.
I said, oh, I can't do that. And he said, why not? And I said, well, we're playing at Nangelock, because I was playing in a band. We're playing for the footy club, or I think it was the footy club ball they had New Year's Eve. Nangelock was always booked out, and we got $100 each for that.
All right.
And I said, I'm going to Adelaide for a week.
Yeah.
So, well, when can you start? I said, the next Monday. So, anyway, I just think it makes me shudder when I think about that. But so I started the week later at Sunraysia Daily, worked there for, I think, about 6 years.
Yeah.
Won the Press Photographer of the Year for a cadet in 78, come second in 79, which was pretty good, because they were the years of Terry Phelan and Bruce Possel and some of the best photographers that ever worked. Herald Sun, The Age, Rothman's Press Photos Award, Keith Stackpole looked after that. But that was a great learning experience, and then I worked part-time doing all sorts of photography. I did wedding photography and family stuff ever since then.
Yeah.
But also did part-time stuff for Sunraysia Daily, like while I was working as a youth worker.
Yeah.
I also worked weekends taking photos.
Right.
So that's how that all came about roughly. But I love old machinery and old houses, and I like to sit there and go, well,
there's a story, isn't there?
Why did they shut that door? Like, who was the last person that walked out of there, shut the door, and no one ever went back there to live there? Mm-hmm. Like, why? Why did they leave that? And, how does your car get to a point where you just go, I'm just going to park it there, forget about it,
There's a story behind
and,
that's out there in the bush.
Yeah, it's quite amazing, and some of those stories have stem from, like, my dad had a Lancia Lambda, which is a 1928 model car. That was taken to the Perkins farm at one stage, was brought back. As a little kid, I used to sit in the rack green and play in that car, because it was just a wreck. Mm-hmm. One of my uncles, late 1990s, restored it, like back to working condition. So there's those sort of things, in the back of my mind, that you can salvage something and and bring it back.
Everything intertwines.
And but I just love the character. I love the settings. I was inspired by Ken Duncan, who does those panoramic photos. I actually went up to Hamilton Island with him and did a photographic weekend, and like, we've got some beautiful scenery here, and it's basically to sort of photograph the unseen. I also can get excited by a little ant sort of towing a leaf. It's pretty amazing, or a good sunset, or just a nice shot of a speedboat coming around the bend when the river's like glass.
As Sunraysia's worst fisherman, I always get the best sunrise photos.
Still there. Hopefully it'll bite. Yeah. But I just love being able to do that. It's not trying to sell the photos even. It's just to actually capture that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Glenn, the 1970s.
Yeah, so obviously we've heard a big part of growing up on a block, and
Yep.
your involvement, your relationship with the Perkins now, and sort of linking all that back. So that's a really big picture, I think, for people that weren't aware and didn't know. But tell us a bit, your teenage years. What was it like to be a teenager in this region?
Oh, well, it was good. I always had fun as a teenager. I guess, though, my dad worked extremely hard. We had probably about 40 acres of vines at Cardross, all up, that Dad was working, and part in the early stages he had a full-time permanent man, because we also had 25 acres of stone fruit at Nangelop. We started with stone fruit, then we planted citrus, and Dad bought my uncle out, so we ended up with 50 acres of citrus at one stage. But I was the only boy in the family, so I spent a lot of time on the tractor with my dad, and was taught very early in the stage to disc, to cultivate, to use a silly plough, to spray, whatever. So I'd either be working there or working at Nangelock on weekends and after work, and I like money. And Dad, in the 60s, I would have been probably, I think, still at primary school. Dad bought a Maton double cutaway guitar for me. And so that's a semi-acoustic, a bit like an ES335 Gibson. It was a really good guitar. It was a 66 model, so it was only a couple of years old, belonged to my cousin, and a 40 watt Moody valve amp. So, so that made a lot of noise at home.
Your sisters would have loved that.
Well, they had a piano.
That leads me on to the question, were you a rat bag or a goody two-shoes?
No, a bit of both. Because, I may have got kicked off the next door neighbour's rack room for laying alley rings. That was Robertson's, Bruce Robinson, the senior sergeant. Bruce's dad, he kicked me off the rack ring, and I may have got sent home from the football too at Cardross when I was about 13, because the policeman, he wanted to know how my car got, well, whose car was it,
how did they get there?
and it had dents on it, no front bumper. It was a wreck that my dad had bought for spare parts, but I got it going, and I decided to go down and watch the footy. I used to park it in the rack room, but this day it was raining, I didn't want to get wet, so I decided I'd park at the Cardross Oval with all the other cars. And the policeman come up to the window, "How'd this car get here, son?" "Well, I drove it." "How about you get in it,
Take it home.
drive it home again, and do not ever bring it back here before we go and see old man." And anyway, they didn't tell Dad. I did. But I drove home. I didn't drive it into the Oval again after that. But so I was playing music, learnt from an early stage, and ended up playing we used to play at the talent nights at the Workers.
Okay, yep.
So we had a band with Frank Ferraro, I learned, and Vince. Sammy Vincent's father, Javasi. I just couldn't think there. Sorry, Vince, but Vince was learning the bass, and we'd play at the Talent Quest, because his sister worked there at the Workers, and if you won it, you'd win $10 or $15 or something. So played a lot of music, and then I actually got into a band playing the guitar with my cousin, who played drums. He was a bit older than me, so he had a vehicle to get us around, and Jeff Golke was playing the organ, and so I ended up earning money playing music on the weekend. Played in a school band with Ian Noyce and a few others. I think we had a jug band, and I was playing the T-chest bass,
Right.
And yeah, we did a few gigs with them. But yeah, between that, attending Speedway, work, you didn't get into too much trouble, but you may have taken the odd lap around the block in the car at night, and, you know, a few things like that, but yeah.
One last question. What gets Glenn Milne out of bed?
Oh, the dogs. No. But look. Now we've got quite a big family, and we've got 3 boys that are intellectually disabled. So that keeps us on our toes fairly well, because you know they're always. If you don't get up, they're ringing to ask questions from a very early part of the morning.
Yep.
But then we've got other kids that are grown up. And we've got extended family, adopted kids, so they've now got kids and grandkids. So there's quite an extensive family now, and we've got I've got a grandson coming over to stay the night tonight. He was over yesterday. We've got how many is about 10 and another one on the way, grandkids.
Far out.
A couple of great grandkids. So
Yeah.
look, that's all pretty exciting, watching them grow up.
Yep.
And on top of that, it's still a great place to live in Mildura. There's still good friends, there's good family. You know, my daughter-in-law's brother, his wife is the daughter of one of the guys who went to school with, you know.
Yeah. So there's always those connections.
Living in Redcliffe,
Yeah.
there's always, you're related to people in the street, you know the people around the corner. It's just a great part of the world. So between relatives and friends, like, it's still worth getting involved and helping build on our community and doing stuff for our community. Redcliffe's Market, you know, I went there this morning. Like,
That's the best
it's
market in
fantastic.
Sunraysia, I
It is, and you know, you walk down the street and there's people that you haven't seen for ages, and they stop and have a chat. Ran into Franz Willman, you know,
Wouldn't have a clue.
loves Volkswagens, was a Volkswagen mechanic,
Yeah.
played golf. He's just a great character. His wife was a school teacher at Mildura Senior College, and Franz, I've known him for 45 years maybe.
Yeah.
And I ran into him today. I hadn't seen him for ages. Just great to see him.
Just
I know the couple of
You know?
times I have seen you out in public, you're always talking to someone, and it's hard to get your attention. You know too many people, I think. It's always,
But
you just give the nod and the wave.
Well, I love it. You know, I go up the street on a Saturday morning and have a coffee. Well, I'm up there nearly every morning.
Yeah.
And it's great because you can see people. They may want to talk about something to do with council. They might just want to say hello. But it's no good if you lock yourself in your room and don't do anything.
That's right.
Get out among the people and just enjoy our community and have a bit of time for each other. Because there's people out there that care about all of us in one way or another. Some people out there that don't care too, but I like to be contactable, and I like to run into people and see how they're going. I love running into the people I went to school with and just see how their kids are going and how they're going, and know that they're doing okay, you know. And I find that great.
I think it's great to see that everyone is a lot more comfortable with that now after what happened with COVID and everyone being at home. I think everyone is now back in the state of being out in the community, seeing people face to face, and not relying on, you know, all these socials and other devices. Like, I think it's so important to have people skills, and I think that
look, it's far better, and there's a lot of people, like my friends from school. You know, you just see them, and I love them. Like, I wouldn't change anything. You can walk up to them, give them a hug, and actually mean it, that you're really pleased to see them. And you know, I went to school with Jenny Norris, Cam Woodward's mum. You know, and you know, to see him achieve. And I know Cam well. You know, he always says hello to me because I was always interested to see how he went when he rode. You know, I watched him, and you know, Lee Adams, his wife's auntie is also my auntie. Like, there's connections, and you just, it's just nice to catch up with people and watch their kids grow up, and you know, and just share some of the joy that they've had, and you share a few traumas too with some of your friends, you know, because you see some of them have had kids that have been killed in car accidents and all sorts of things, but so there's that downside too, but it's still nice to be there for them as well.
For sure.
Exactly. Well, Glenn, thank you very much for meeting with us on this podcast. There's a stubby holder.
No worries.
Well worth your time.
That's to keep your lemonade nice and cold.
Yeah.
Good on you, mate. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thank
We
you.
really appreciate it.
Well, that's about it, guys. If you like this podcast, check this one out here over Kristen's head. Be good, stay safe, and bye for now.
And if you don't like it, blame him.
Blame Paul, that's correct.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.